Good morning, everybody. It's always a thrill for me to give one of the first talks at Tidally each year and give an update on Heritage Monitoring Scout. It's very appropriate as Heritage Monitoring Scouts launched during our 2016 Tidally United Summit. And then every year after, I really enjoy giving the update, just showing the collective work of so many people across the state and just how crazy proud I am of everyone working so hard. This year is sort of a double up because we didn't have a Tidally last year. So I'm going to catch you up on 2-year update and be very focused on talking about our Heritage Monitoring Scout grant, giving you some idea of the overview and deliverables and coming to a close on that soon. You're going to be here live for some of the synthesis as we're starting to put some broader impacts together. So the morning session is really focused on case studies from across the state, as you will see, and some of it, because of limits of travel and limited conference participation this year, we're getting to really dive deep into each other's case studies for the first time and look for some of those commonalities and so what's and putting some of that together. So I have a few comments at the end of my presentation on things to look for and that I'll be looking for in those presentations, but also sharing some of the larger numbers of the overall project. And then lastly, I'll just tell you what's going to be happening with HMS after the grant. The grant goes till October 31st, and then HMS existed before the grant, and it will after the grant, and some things will just change a little bit. So I'll give you an update on that. I don't think Heritage Monitoring Scouts would be new to anybody today, but I did want to give a little overview slide as HMS being a community-based archaeology approach to site stewardship, which includes site monitoring with the scouts, with the public, going out, seeing the impacts, assessing the threats, assessing the priority level, documenting what artifacts might be there in place. And then the database is another big part of HMS, and I'll be talking a little bit about that. So the scouts enter the information into the database, and we can also share that data when appropriate with other scouts and with the state and our land managers. Training falls outside of the grant, but has been ongoing through FPAN efforts throughout the year. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and that's a big part of supporting HMS. But the important thing I want you to know is HMS is all about engaging with the community to track changes to sites over time, and particularly those impacted by climate change, but other threats as well. Our special category grant, I kind of had to pick based on the deliverables 4 things to focus on for today. Site monitoring was a large component of that project, and the directive was a minimum of 500 sites. So we have met that number and went out and monitored sites all over the state. We'll be telling you about some of those today. 3D scanning, the directive was a minimum of 12. We scanned 13 sites, and I have just a few preliminary shots to show you of those as we're starting to turn those in for approval to the state. Starting after Tidally. And then Florida Master Site File Updates was written into the grant, and I got very nervous. If you look at a minimum of 500 sites, I thought we could be looking at a minimum of 500 updates, and we're close to 100. So 1 out of 5 of the sites visited needed an update. And by modernizing, I just mean using current location tools to figure out where we are, make sure the sites are mapped in the right place, and refining, looking at some of the site boundaries. And then report, we had an interim report submitted last year, and we're going to build on that to submit the final, and that should be in for review in September, and hope to have it all wrapped up by October 31st. And thanks to Tim Knepke, who's our grant manager at the state, who is on this morning, and I know eagerly awaiting our report. Some preliminary stats from the grant: we had 697 forms submitted and 580 sites monitored, and we had a priority list of 2,000 sites that were approved by DHR and went out, and we were able to monitor 580 of them, and some were monitored twice. Scout signups, we had 293 people sign up during the time of the grant, and 26 active land managers and 27 active FPAN interns and staff who were also part of the project. Some numbers for you. 98 Florida Master Site File updates were required, and we are busy working on those right now and getting those in. We had a total of 19 state permits that were put through, and thank you to Brandon Ackerman, who did very timely review of those of the permit applications and issuing the permits and working with us on some of the extensions. So that worked very smoothly. So thank you to Brandon. And we did have one federal permit, and we had other federal partners that didn't require permits, but those were things on this slide I was not expecting as part of the grant and have really enriched the experience. I wanted to give a shout out to the state land managing units. These are the 19 that we had active permits across the state, and some were for monitoring, some were for the 3D scanning, and some were for the aerial mapping, or all three. So thank you to them as collaborators on this project. The interim report went in end of June and was finalized a little after that time, but gave us a good idea of what a monitoring report of this scale would look like, and of course had to put our COVID-19 statement up at the front, as we had a lot of impacts to the projects from that. But we had the instructions was one of the deliverables I hadn't really thought of either. We do a lot of training in person with our scouts and put a lot of material on the website, but this is a downloadable instructions that any scout can have, and really helped us put two-page what it looks like, what the different threats look like, and what the different artifacts they might encounter will look like. And you'll note all the artifacts are taken with our photo image card, because it is part of our ethics that they sign off on, that they will not remove any artifacts, but keep them all in place for documenting and recording. I don't know if many of the projects today will talk about shoreline mapping, so I wanted to just share a little bit of that using our Aero 100 and also the Faro Focus to help monitor, record, document shorelines as we were seeing them. Emma here is wearing our Aero 100. The antenna is up in the ball cap, and we have also moved on to Aero Gold that has more of a little handle pipe thing that you hold on as you're moving around. But it was great to get volunteers out using the hat, and we were able to map the Iguana Peninsula in its entirety. While we were out there, we had to monitor the sites anyway, so walking the shoreline was a good activity, and we did it the first year. These are some of the erosional edges, and you can see the volunteer holding the hat. Sometimes it was good to hold it back, and we do now have a pole so we can hold the antenna out if the erosional edge is not stable. And this image, you can see there's our meter stick. So we're looking at some higher bluff erosional edge. There it's easy to define. In some other areas it would become a little mixed with the grasses as the marsh grass is migrating upland, so catching some of those edges too. But I wanted to point out our 2020 baseline is the red. We went back the following year and had some more sites to monitor on that eastern edge. You're more used to hear talking about Shell Bluff, which is on the western edge of the peninsula, but on the eastern edge, there is erosion happening too. And this line, you know, some of this might be the Aero 100 has a 30 centimeter accuracy, and now we're using our Aero Gold that has a 3 centimeter accuracy. So this will get closer, but we were able to observe in ground truth where trees had fallen that explain why there's this 5-foot shift in some areas. And just keep in mind, we didn't have a major storm on this coast last year. We had plenty of nor'easters and just regular large storms and tides, but we didn't have a big name storm like we did the years of Matthew and Irma. So that's a lot of change for one year where there wasn't a massive storm. We're also using scanner. Jeffrey will be talking about that some this afternoon, but used in 13 sites. One of our favorites is Bulow. We were able to make that model and play around with it a lot, and these are some of the topos that Emma was able to produce that show some of the low spots that are underneath Bulow. Land managers have a question of why it feels like it's sinking, and there are some low spots. When you print it, you can feel that hole that's there in the ground. If you're not familiar with Arches, the HMS database moved from a Google beta version over to Arches. So when people go to the landing page, they can enter either the Scout portal or the Land Manager portal and go into Arches. This is a open source inventory system funded by the Getty Conservation Institute. HMS Florida is one of the examples featured on their website, and we have been talking to them more about them wanting to feature what we're doing here and the application we're using as Arches. That we are excited about Arches, and the great thing this year, they are excited about us too. So look for more of those exchanges. And I don't know if we could do the work as well as we do without Solocator. So just giving a plug for this app, and you may see people today using slides or images that have the orientation and also the label built into the photos. So when you upload them into Arches, everyone knows where you are and what you're doing. I just wanted to close with some other larger thoughts to listen to in the presentations later today. I think just the general feeling is, we thought we had more time with these sites that are rapidly eroding, and it's an honor to be there and see them, and a certain sadness we carry away knowing they won't be the same when we come back. So 2 years of recording efforts have really helped show us these sites are often eroding faster than we had thought or anticipated. And there's just a lot of sites for keeping a lot of eyes on. But you will be here today live as we are getting into the synthesis of what it all means and looking for commonalities between the case studies. Listen for partnerships. We could not do this work without the amazing partnerships that we've had before the grant, but really developed over. And these are just some quick ones I put together in the partnership slide. State parks, St. Johns River Water Management District. We'll have a paper from Emma and Graham today. Forestry, FWC, local government such as Fish Island that was purchased as conservation land and managed by the city of St. Augustine. And of course, DHR, who has been very kind to review and also fund part of this project. A focus on land managers, so listen for that. We tried to partner our papers this morning, and we know HMS brings added value for them as our participating with land managers brings great value to us and what we're doing, and finding sites, updating the boundaries. And even though it's 19 permits, we like to think of it as 19 collaborators on HMS Florida. With there are 19 that had permits that we were doing monitoring in, but there are 30 land managing units that are participating. So other units are using HMS and documenting through Arches, whether we are there or not. So that's fantastic that it's being used. And the sites that we've seen this year, just some places I've never been before in 15 years, some dramatic landscapes, some less dramatic landscapes. And we picked up a lot of balloons as a broader impact for helping clean some of the sites while we're out there. But it's just been a real privilege to get out and see more of Florida. And for those interested, the breakdown of state-owned versus non-state-owned, we had 666 state sites monitored and 413 non-state, but not all counted towards the grant. So we did have 367 on the grant that were monitored, that were state-owned, and 213 as part of the grant that were on non-state lands. Our volunteers are amazing. This is our first day we could go out and monitor at Fish Island safely together post-vaccination. And you see our land manager down there is JB Miller, who had just had his second shot and was just needing a little time out down there. But so glad that we had the participation, and volunteers were so eager to get out there and help us monitor the sites. And some stats beyond the grant, because even though the grant was a major focus for us this year, we do activities to support HMS outside of the grant. So these are the numbers I gave you at the front. These are what count toward the grant, the 580 sites, but we had over 1,000 sites monitored this year and 160 monitored twice, which is great because we want to see that change over time, and whether it was a storm event or vandalism, people are going back out there to check on that. So since 2016, we've had 2,651 monitoring forms filled out. 826 scouts have signed up since 2016. and obstacles have been huge. COVID-19, I'd like to say this map was from a year ago. This map is from 14 hours ago. So this continues to be an obstacle. The lockdown and closures giving us limited access was not how we wanted to start out. Storms that will create flooding and get in the way of our logistics. And then you're gonna listen for some potpourri of trucks and wild boars and other things that we couldn't have anticipated. I have like less than a minute left, so I'm going to wrap up. But site stewardship has been a big push. So outside of the grant, I've been participating with Beth Paydon and the National Partners for Site Stewardship. That was last year's. This is this year's. So mark your calendar, November 2nd and 3rd, and I'll put these dates in the chat. We're having another national conference with many other site stewardship programs participating. And this happened outside of the grant, but we had trainings, virtual trainings. We did, I think, 6 this last year, and FPAN have been talking how to keep the cadence up of once a month. Another big part of my year was working on the North American Heritage at Risk Collaborative, and we have a paper from Meg, so she'll be our last paper today talking about them. Which is important because coming this fall, we have a project funded through the NERS Science Collaborative that will be at the Iguana Peninsula and using the Nahar pipeline to overlay on that project. So bringing to a close, thank you. Put any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll get on to our next speaker.